Hello, welcome to Friday's edition of Cracking the Cryptic, where today we're going to take a look at a classic Sudoku. Those of you who sent in puzzles before to us, where you can do that by email or on Twitter, might know that when we're selecting puzzles to solve on the channel, often what we do is Mark solves them and sees what he thinks, and then he sort of submits them to me if he thinks they're suitable for a live solve, because I do try and solve all the puzzles live. Now he tells me this one he had to bifurcate, so he thinks that this is a good Friday puzzle for us, you know, if we're going to try and make Fridays one of the hardest puzzles of the week. So I'm not quite sure what to make of that. I'm hoping it's not going to be too difficult. I'm hoping you'll get to see the video, because if I absolutely die, you won't. Yeah, if you do want to have a go at the puzzle first, click on the link under the video. That'll take you to our software and you can have a go. So I'll look up at the end. I can't actually remember who sent this one in, but thank you to them anyway. Right, let's do it. How are we going to start this puzzle? Oh, okay, I can pencil mark some ones up in that block. Ones into those two squares because of these ones. This has got to be an 8 because of the interaction of the 8s here on this bottom 3x3 block. There's only one square left that can take an 8. Let's put the 8 in, pencil mark some 8s over there. Another 8 up here. 8s into one of those two squares, and 8s into one of these two squares. So 8s were a little bit fruitful. 5s, look, these two 5s, I mean there's a 5 here. 5s into one of those two positions in the centre. There seems to be quite a lot of 4s in the grid. Yeah, 4s, there we go, we can place a 4 here. 4 into those two squares. This is just on its own, this is a 4 because of the interaction of the 4s in those 4 squares there. One of these two squares is also a 4. This 2, we can pencil mark into those two squares. Now, there's actually no 2s at all in the whole, well, in the bottom 6 rows of the grid, so that's a shame. 3s into one of these two squares here. 1s. Okay. So look at 9s then. 9s into one of those two squares. Again, there's no 9s in the first 6 columns of the grid. Okay, wow. Right, I'm going to have to look at this a bit more diligently, I think, from now on. 2, 6, 2, 3, 6. Okay. So we have a 2 and a 9 in this block up here. We haven't yet managed to put a 2 and a 9 into row 2 of the grid. So neither of these squares can be 2 and 9. So these two are going to have to be 2 and 9. Let's label them as such. Now that means these two squares have got to be 3 and 6, and they are a pair. Fours, 8s, 8s. These two 6s, we can place the 6 into that square. This 9 now becomes powerful, forces a 9 into this square, locks 9s over there. These two squares have got to be 2 and 7. Let's label that up. And the interaction of this 9 and this 9 means there's a 9 in one of those two squares in the top middle box, and that means there's a 9 in one of those two squares in the middle 3x3. That's matching the 9s, look, in rows 5 and 6 in these So if we look at this row of the grid, we've not managed to put a 9 in here yet, but we know the 9 must be in one of those 3 squares now. Because obviously it can't be in either of these squares or these squares because of these pencil mark 9s that we've got. This 5, there must be a 5 in one of those 2 squares, and that's going to be really helpful. So now we have a 5-8 pair in this block. Our pencil mark 1 here, this can no longer be a 1. If I try and put a 1 here, the implication of the other pencil marks is that I have to put a 5 and an 8 in this block. So it's not possible. That means that's a 1 and a 4. Let's mark that with 5 and 8. This is a 4 now. This is a 4 here. One of these 2 squares must be a 1. This one allows me to place a 1 here as well. So the 1's in these 2 squares. That's going to put a 1 into this cell in the central 3x3. Again, that's just combining those 3 squares there. And in placing this one, I took the place of a 5. So again, I'm going to get another digit. If we now look at this column, you can see I still got to place 2 and 7. So this is a 2 or a 7. Well, it can't be a 2. So that must be a 7. This is a 2. This is a 7. Certainly no reason yet why Mark would have got stuck on this. This means this is a 2 here. That's a 9. That's a 9. 3 and 6 into these 2 squares. And 2 and 7 into these top squares here. Now, these 2 must be 3 and 7 in some order, and these 2 squares must be 2 and 9 in some order. Nine's here, look, and this 9 results, that's a 9 down here. 9 into one of those 2 squares in this block. That was a lot of 9s. Ah, yes, okay, so now we have to use the fact that we'd identified these as 9s before. So again, we actually knew the 9s were locked into one of those 3 squares. It's useful that my memory didn't play tricks on me there. So now down here, we've got 2, 7, 2, 3, 5, 6 and 7. Okay, so we again, look, if we come down here, where can a 5 go? The 5 here and the 5 here eliminate 2 of the open squares. That square is a 5. So this square is a 3 or a 6. Can't be a 2 or a 7 because of the 2, 7 here. And therefore this square, is 2 or a 7. Okay, I was hoping we might be able to resolve it, but no. Can we do anything clever? No, well, I'm not seeing it yet. Let's have a look at these bottom rows. So we've got 1, 2, 5 and 7. This square is a 2 or a 5. This row, 1, 3, 6 and 8. So you can probably see what I'm looking for here is pairs of numbers or interesting looking combinations left in the open cells. If they can be all sorts of things, I'm not terribly interested in that. And here we've got 2, 3, 6 and 7. 6, 7. This is tricky, isn't it? I imagine this is the point at which Mark used his celebrated bifurcation technique. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to give it a few more minutes, so apologies if video gets a bit slow here. But I want to just stare at this for a few minutes. 2, 3, 5, 6, 8. Just to see if we... So if we look at this square, 2, 3, and 6, I think. So one of the things I'm looking for now is to try and identify rows and columns where numbers are limited in terms of the positions they can take. So I'm looking at this column. You can see we need 2, 3, 5, 6, and 8. So this square can be all sorts of things. 2, 3. Let's actually label it up. 5 or 8. So the 8s in this column are locked into just 2 squares. Now, this is the sort of starting point for identifying X-wings and empty rectangles and the like. It's identifying where a number can only go in 2 positions in a row or column. But the problem here with the 8s is that there's just nothing to bite on. If we come across and look at all the other columns and see whether we can limit 8s to exactly these 2 squares, you can see there's no likely candidate column. This square here already can't take an 8, so there's not going to be anything we can do terribly clever there. But you can see that if we look down the column, there's a similar restriction going on with 6s though. This 6 here is eliminating a 6, so there's 2 squares that a 6 can go into in column 8. Now let's check that. Just 6. Oh, that is interesting. Okay, yeah, look at the 6s. These 2 6s here. So in column 2, we get the same restriction. So let's look at this. This is potentially interesting. These squares here are looking at columns only. Column 2 and column 8. Where can the 6s go? Only in the purple squares. Now, what that means, and I'm not sure how useful it's going to be looking at it, but is that there cannot be any 6s in the yellow squares. And you can prove that to yourself by just testing it. So let's imagine you looked at the finished solution, there was a 6 here. Now if there's a 6 here, you know, looking at column 2, that there would be no 6 here, so there would have to be a 6 in this square, because there's only 2 positions in the column that the 6 can take. So the 6 is either here and here, or the corollary of that is that either here or here. Now in either case, obviously there's already a 6 in both of these rows in the purple squares. So the yellow squares can't also include a 6, and that's one of the things people forget about X-wings or never knew about X-wings, is once you've identified the pattern as it relates in this instance to the columns, the effect it has is on the rows. So it's these open squares in these rows we need to look at. Now let's actually fill them all in. I'm going to fill in all these yellow squares according to what they can be now. I'm going to start in the bottom just because we've got 5 digits in the bottom. So we need 2, 3, 6, and 7. So this square now cannot be a 6. This can... well, okay, that is interesting. Oh, whoops. That's not interesting. It can only be a 3 or a 7 now, because the 2 was ruled out and the 6 is ruled out by the X-wing. So we'll come back to this square in a sec. 2, 3, 6, 7 here. That's 2, 3, or 7 because of the 6 being ruled out by the X-wing. Let's check this one. And this doesn't look great, does it? Because there's so many things this can be. 1, 2, 3. Can't be 4. Well, this doesn't look good at all. 5. It can be. Can't see why it can't be. Well, it can't be a 6. It can be a 7, I think. So that's basically done nothing for that square. Similarly, this square, I don't think this is going to be great, but let's check it. 1, 2, 3 it can be, 4 it can't be, 5 it can be, can't be 6 of the X-wing, can be 7, can be 9. Still a lot of possibilities for this square. Let's check that one. This one doesn't even have the 2 to eliminate. 2, 3, 5, 7. Can't be a 9 because of that one. Okay, so the most interesting square is this one. So what can we do about this square? Can we... Yes, we can. Yes, we can. Now, this is weird, actually. This pattern on the 6s, it also sort of exists in relation to another digit. So if we're trying to eliminate one of these digits from this square, we know we're looking at 3s and 7s. So if we look at this column and ask ourselves, where can the 3s go? You can see there are 3 possibilities. 2 of the squares overlap with the X-wing on the 6s, and this square here. So let's make these green. Okay, these are the positions that 3s can take in this column. Now, in the central column, 3s are limited to one of those squares. And in this column over here, look at that. This 3 is really dominating the pattern here. So a 3 can go here, it can go here, and it can go here. It can't go in this square because of this 3. So look at this pattern. Now this is called a swordfish. So we've had a few questions in relation to the X-wing videos we've done asking about swordfishes. Well, here is one. And what we've managed to do here, it's just one sort of row extension, if you like, from the X-wing pattern we talked about with the 6s. We know the 7s in these columns are limited to exactly these 3 rows, row 4, row 5 and row 9. So we know, however, when we look at the finished solution, there'll have to be a 3 in one of these squares. Let's imagine it's this one in this column. Now if this was a 3, that means in this column there would only be one possibility for a 3, it would have to be there. And in this column there'd only be one possibility for a 3, it would have to be there. And however we shuffle these 3s around, we always end up with 1 3 in each of the green positions in each row. And that means, let's just extend the logic of our swordfish, what we can now do is, looking at these rows, we can eliminate 3s from all sorts of places. I mean, that's square technically, but obviously it doesn't really apply. So all of those yellow squares now cannot contain a 3 because of the swordfish. So now you can see immediately this is going to be important, because we can get rid of the 3 here, the 3 here, and the 3 here. That doesn't do a great deal for us, but this 3 does, and this 3 is massive, because now this square can only be a 7. So we have an X-wing and a swordfish piling up upon each other, where they sort of overlap but relate to different numbers. Goodness only knows how you compile a puzzle like this. I don't actually know if this is a handcrafted puzzle or a computer generated puzzle, but my goodness. So now this 7, let's just make sure that we get the maximum value from it. Obviously it's going to give us a 2 here, but I'm just seeing whether I can see anything else. So this is a 2 now. Let's get rid of the 2 there. I'm not sure whether I'm going to have to get rid of the highlighting. This square here now can't be a 2. These two, this is a 3 or a 6 into this square. Which matches up with the 3, 6 I've already got there, look. So these two squares now must be 1 and 7. There's a 7 there, so now we get a 7 here, which we could have seen actually because of if I'd looked at those 7s before. That gives us a 7 and a 2 at the top. This square is a 1. This square is not a 1. We've actually got pencil marked 1s in there, so let's unwind those. Used up one of the positions in the swordfish on the 3s in doing that. One, 7, 7, 3, 6. So this square's obviously got to be a 3 or a 6. There's a 6 here, look. So that's a 3. Now that's a 6. That's a 3. Complete the swordfish pattern with a 3 there, therefore. That's a 7. Let's eliminate the 3 here. So we need 2, 5 and 8 into these squares. This square can only be a 5, look, because there's already a 2 and an 8 in the column. That means that's a 7. Move the 7 from this square. All sorts of 3, 6 pairs going on everywhere. This is a 3 or a 6 here. Sevens. This has got to be a 7. We have a 2, 5, 8 triple in this column, look. So the missing number is 6, I think. We haven't yet put a 6 in, so that must be a 6. These 3 squares are 1, 2 and 5. So this is a 1 or a 5. This is a 2 or a 5. That's going to give us another digit. This must be the 1. Threes here mean this is obviously a 3. 6 and 8 into these 2 squares. 3 here unwinds the 3 at the top. And yeah, we've clearly, I think anyway, we've broken the back of this. Very interesting puzzle. 9 here now. This square here must be, what's that going to be, a 3, I think. That resolves the 3 and the 6. That resolves the 6 and the 8. That resolves the 8 and the 5. This square here now is a 2. 2, 5, 5. And hopefully, if I haven't made an error, which I have apparently. Oh, that's annoying. I don't want to put a 3 in there, I want to put an 8. And that's right. So, fascinating puzzle. It's got into my head a bit because I'm not sure I've seen that very often. We had an X-wing overlapping onto a swordfish that eliminated this square down here. Beautiful. Beautiful, and that's why it's taken me 20 minutes to solve it, or 23 minutes to solve it, and it probably took Mark 5 minutes, because he would have got to the sticking point and blasted through it. So you pay your money, you take your choices. That's the slow way of doing it, but I hope for some of you that's what you come to the channel to watch. We'll be back soon with another edition of Cracking the Cryptic.